And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. We're brought to you by our new friends over at Givetti. It's a company started by a fellow who lost his dad to lung cancer as a non-smoker at the age of 48. By the time the doctors caught it, it was way too late. He was already at stage 4. The system failed him. So he wanted to create something that would be more preventative in nature, not just sick care, which is a lot of the current healthcare business model in America. Givetti is the opposite. They test over 100 labs, things your doctor doesn't even look at, hormones, inflammation levels, metabolic health, nutrient levels, etc. I just went through my testing with Givetti, man. It is so exhaustive. I've got to go through it again. I mean, I'm going to have to go through the entire video and everything a second time before I even know what questions to ask. That's how in-depth they go. And depending on where you live around the country, they might even be able to just come to your house and draw the blood right there. So go to gogivetti.com/Deace. That's Geviti. All right, go Givetti, get it for longevity, get it. All right, gogivetti.com/Deace. Use the promo code Deace for 20% off. That's gogivetti.com/Deace. Promo code Deace for 20% off. All right, coming up on the show today, let's get a view on the ground where the Republican base voter is. We're going to talk to Matthew Simon. He's the chairman of the North Dakota GOP. He'll be joining us here at the bottom of the hour. Next hour, I'm going to give you my elevator, 10,000-foot view of the environment that I think we are in for this 2026 midterm election cycle. I believe it is 7 months or 9 months from today.
We're moving right along, yeah.
9 months from today will be the 2026 midterm elections. Well, we'll actually start voting in about 7 months from today around the country. But the actual election day itself is 9 months from today. All right. And so what environment are we headed into? I'm going to lay that out here for you guys in the audience and Todd and Aaron, and let them question, comment, or insult. And then for fake news or not, there is a graphic going around that people on our side that I respect, they are trumpeting, and I can see why, but I have a bit of an alternative take as to why this graph could actually be a problem. And I'm hoping you guys are going to call me fake news and talk me out of that, okay? Because if I'm right, then we have reached the intersection of what is profitable as an industry and how it conflicts with what is profitable to actually govern a country. And that's not a great place for a movement to be in, right? You want those things to be in alignment, right? Or at least close to it anywhere, trending in that direction, right?
Yes.
But we'll get into that coming up in the final segment of the show. But before we do all of that, let's do this first. Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by cranking up the economic optimism. President Trump says the GDP, he expects it to explode this year.
We should be at 15%. I'll tell you, if our new head of the Fed, who I think is going to be great, and he's a really high quality person, but if he does the job that he's capable, we can grow at 15%. I think more than that.
Meanwhile, according to a Gallup tracking poll, kind of out of nowhere, Americans are starting to get or staying optimistic about the economy overall. 49% of Americans expect the economy to grow this year. That's up 11 points from last April when this question was last asked. The stock market, 50% of Americans think that's going to explode this year, up 21 points from last year. On inflation, 62% of Americans expect that to continue to rise. That's down a point from this time last year. And on employment, not so optimistic. 50% of Americans think that's going to go up this year as well. But overall, some economic optimism from Gallup, seemingly out of nowhere. Not so optimistic over in Rasmussen land, where a new poll there shows voters think Joe Biden did a better job than Trump is doing by a margin of 48-40. What? We're now learning, thanks to previously unreported FBI documents, that Donald Trump, all the way back in 2006, was one of the first people to contact the Palm Beach, Florida Police Department when it was known that Jeffrey Epstein was being investigated over sex crimes. A document obtained by the FBI from the Palm Beach Police Department explains how Trump called the police chief, expressed gratitude for going after Epstein, and saying they need to broaden their focus to Epstein fixer partner Ghislaine Maxwell, calling her, quote, evil. That's going to be a fly in the ointment of some people's narratives on the Epstein files. It's another day that ends in Y, so we've got another Democrat turning on the cameras and proudly blaspheming. Here's Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear.
But we rarely talk about the why. People want to know what drives us, especially in a world with social media where everyone's looking for the next authentic thing. For me, that's my faith. Most of the decisions I make are based on that golden rule that says we love our neighbor as ourselves, and that parable of the Good Samaritan that says everyone is our neighbor. And so when I've taken actions like vetoing the nastiest piece of anti-LGBTQ legislation that ever came through my state, I described it in those terms. I said my faith teaches me that all children are children of God, and I didn't want people picking on those kids.
We once again go to our home state of Iowa, where a few bills have been introduced aimed at further restricting or criminalizing baby killing. One bill, House File 2316, invoking the 14th Amendment, would expand the definition of person under Iowa Code to include an unborn child from conception till birth. If passed, all criminal and civil laws would apply to the unborn baby and would make an abortion at any stage of pregnancy a homicide, which it already is. Hundreds of abolitionists descended upon Des Moines yesterday to gather in the state capitol in support of that bill. Well done, all. House File 2316 is one of a number of bills introduced. Its fate is uncertain. The New York Times editorial board is backpedaling on recreational marijuana use. The Times cited data claiming over 18 million Americans smoke weed over 21 days a month. Keep in mind, the weed you can buy, if you can buy it these days, is much stronger than the doobies the boomer hippies were smoking 50 years ago. The editorial board said the, quote, U.S. has recently gone too far in accepting and even promoting its use, and says its previous statements about downplaying negative impacts of recreational weed were misguided. And finally, we go back to Des Moines, where abolitionist Nathan Weiser was in town to support that aforementioned bill criminalizing baby killing in the Hawkeye State. He stopped into a local coffee joint called Smoky Row for a brief brew review.
Get the out of my city, you ass. Get the out of here. I've already taken pictures of your license plate.
So,
no.
We don't want to
know. We don't care. Get the out of my
state.
state.
So you just said a bunch of stuff and then you don't want to hear anything
We
about
don't want to hear it. Yeah, you're a loser. You have no right to tell me what to do with my body, you piece of shit.
Bye. Come on, Heaven.
Go kill yourself, you son of a bitch.
Okay.
Woo, you feel
Bye.
Suck my ass.
Yeah, that's very kind. Very kind.
Get out of here, you
You should turn to Christ. You can still turn to Christ.
Jesus Christ, you ugly
So yeah, anyways, the coffee here was decent, but I don't know about the clientele. There's a lot of different hair colors and stuff, and it kind of like messed with the vibe and the color scheme going inside. But otherwise, I was been pretty nice.
And that's what happened while we were away.
How many abortions do you think that woman's had? Answer is all of them.
Finding her at that particular Smoky Row, I know exactly where that is. That's the least surprising thing ever.
Aaron's montage brought to you by ourselves. Make sure you subscribe to Blaze TV so you don't miss a minute of what we do just for you. All kinds of exclusive content, not just our show, but all the shows. And right now you can subscribe so you never miss a minute of it ever. You can even go back and watch stuff that's in our archives that maybe you missed before you wanted to see at the time but could not. It's just $8 a month, 26 cents a day. If you use my last name, Deace, as your promo code at blazetv.com/Deace. Use the code Deace for the big discount. blazetv.com/Deace. Use the code Deace for the big discount. All right. Where do I want to begin on Aaron's montage? Let's begin on the Epstein front. All right. So Aaron already addressed the documentation as people are still going through the various Epstein files. Now we have documented confirmation of Trump reaching out to the feds. That was back in 2006, correct, Aaron?
This was the local police department.
Local police department,
Yep.
yeah. But it was back in 2006.
2006,
right?
yeah.
Right. Here are some other things that have caught my eye. Well, there's a lot of things that have caught my eye that are out there. Trying to verify whether they're true or not, right, is not easy, right? So I'm trying to do the best I can, to think I can at least quasi-verify it or affirm the source of it before I share it. And I haven't gotten community noted yet, so I think I'm doing a pretty good job. Okay, so here are some things that have stood out to me just in the last couple of days since we last talked about this. In fact, let's take these one by one and get you guys' reactions. All right. United Arab Emirates diplomat, now UAE, of course, that's the most, maybe liberal's not the right term. About contemporary Ataturk country in the Arab world. Is that fair? Maybe.
I mean, I know what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe modernized. Maybe we'll go with that. Well, contemporary and modernized are kind of the same word. Okay. But we'll use modernized. All right. So a UAE diplomat offered her 13-year-old sister to Epstein in an email, quote, "She's even prettier than me." That's Hind Awas, I think is her name. She shows up in numerous emails, approximately 469 of them. And in several cases is seen helping to schedule girls with Jeffrey Epstein. Reaction.
That's bad.
Is that bad?
That's bad.
Okay. Congressman Thomas Massie says Les Wexner, founder of Victoria's Secret, is a co-conspirator of Epstein and the unredacted Epstein files that members of Congress were just privy to. And the Department of Justice has now unredacted Les Wexner's name along those lines. Thoughts on that?
Well, there's a pattern of evidence of multiple different types of people on multiple global angles. So, I don't know. The fact that you are doing this strikes me that as you continue to read on, we should be paying attention to pattern building and then how any other variable that comes along fits into that pattern.
Any thoughts on anything so far, Aaron? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, why were they redacted to begin with?
Well, that's a question.
Who made the decision to redact them?
Why haven't they been?
When was that decision made?
Why haven't they been indicted?
Well, a lot of people have been asking that question lately about and including the women themselves. Like, I don't. Everybody.
That's true. There's one popular woman that has been cited in a lot of places. She's actually a professional escort that willingly sold herself into the Epstein nexus. And some of these sites are putting her out there like she was, some kidnapped, underage pubescent girl groomed into this, and that's not the case. See, that's the thing, all right, we have to be concerned about here is what's real and what's not. Here's what we know is true. The United States Department of Justice has unredacted Les Wexner's name, the founder of Victoria's Secret, as a co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein since Congressman Thomas Massie outed him on television yesterday.
All along, whatever this thing is, it's been abundantly clear that people on all sides of this are uncertain. They have no idea what the blowback and chain of reaction will be to releasing anything at all. And increasingly, apparently, that jig is up somewhat. And we don't know all the reasons why that may be the case.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick now is confirming that he did go to Epstein Island. He did have lunch with Jeffrey Epstein. But he says it wasn't a major thing or a scandal. His family was there, and he sees no need to resign.
Well, I guess.
When did he go?
Isn't that verifiable if his family went with them? Okay.
Why would you take your family to Epstein Island?
I mean, that seems like you've just hung yourself with a ridiculous lie or...
See, I think people think we're dealing with elitism here, and that's sufficient but not precise. I mean, listen, elitism doesn't necessarily cause this level of macabre immorality. Almost all of the men who signed our Declaration of Independence were the elites of their era. Ivy League educated, wealthy, landowners, successful. Okay. I mean, that would describe many of the 56 men. Among the wealthiest men in the colonies was the guy who signed the Declaration first, John Hancock. He was one of the wealthiest men in the colonies. All right. They were the elites. I agree that concentration of elite power within has more of a propensity to lead to this kind of stuff than people who just don't have access to it because they just don't have the social standing to act on their own total depravity. And it's not as if, it doesn't mean they're better than the elites. It just means they don't have access to act on their sinfulness the way the elites do. And so they just can't manifest this much level of corruption just as a farmer or a factory worker or a drywaller, right?
I have an answer to the question that I just posed. He testified this morning, actually, Howard Lutnick. It was 2012 when he took his family
And
to
so,
Epstein
so
Island.
Epstein
this
had
was
already been to
after-
prison. Yes.
After that.
Yeah. Epstein
My
had
dude,
already been to
you
prison.
took your family. That shows how bad a judgment?
Yeah, I think you should probably be forced to resign for that. You took your family to Epstein Island after you'd already been in prison for trafficking. Okay. But I will say, much of so elitism is a symptom of what we're dealing with. Godlessness is really what you're dealing with here. All right, this report. Newly released documents show an FBI agent removed the hard drive from the jail's camera system, wiping all footage from the night Jeffrey Epstein died. No video, no record, no accountability. They didn't lose the evidence, they erased it. And they expect the public to move on. By the way, I got that from Mark Mitchell, the head of Rasmussen Polling.
I saw that.
That's where I got that one from. Mark Mitchell, the head of Rasmussen Polling, basically. And by the way, Rasmussen is a partisan pollster, but the reason why they're included in the RCP average is they're a very accurate one. They've been among the most accurate pollsters of the last 10 years. Okay, so I mean, if they are a de facto Trump super PAC, they're not push polling for Trump. Their results often end up being pretty accurate, and they're the ones that did the poll, by the way, Aaron, that was in your montage. Yeah. Okay, that Joe Biden is a +8 approval over Donald Trump heads up right now. Yeah. That's a Rasmussen poll.
That video tape thing of the prison. You often say, Steve, don't start off by saying if this is true, and you've said your reasons why.
Yeah, typically in the Trump era, if you start with if this is true, you've already lost the plot. Yeah.
But and you give us, Aaron and I, incredible freedom on this show for conjecture. I don't feel comfortable. I think you're the only person, because it's the name over your shoulder, saying if that's true, what and who it implicates. I mean,
it looks like this was done in 2019 is when this was done, according to this report. So this story has become a catch-all for everything wrong with us right now. People are attempting to exploit it for their own agendas. People are grifting the heck off of it with all kinds of AI things and fake photos and everything else. That's not Jeffrey Epstein in a beard. That's an AI photo. Now, I'll tell you this. I think it's way more likely he's alive than he killed him, than he unalived himself. I think that's way more likely. Way more likely. I don't know how likely it is, but since I think it's 0.0% he unalived himself, it's way more. If it's 1%, it's 100% more likely in my math. Okay? But if you're watching that, if you're looking at that photo, that's an AI fake. All right, the thing with Mom Donnie is a little boy with Epstein. That's an AI fake. But here's the thing, though. That photo's an AI fake, but Mom Donnie's mom is legit in the Epstein files. That's legit. Okay? That is legit. And so this is like trying to catch Kaiser Sose.
This is Joe Pesci, right? Riddles wrapped up
yes,
in enigmas.
Yeah, from that great scene that he had in JFK. Yeah. And no one can still, and if anybody in this audience could do so, I would appreciate it. And maybe I forgot to do this yesterday. I was going to, so this is me reminding myself to do it today. Maybe I will go into one of my private text threads that I'm in with people, our folks around the country, not to mention any names, and just say, hey, I know in this thread, several of you know Steve Bannon very well. What is, I'm asking, I'm just asking, was it all an op? Was it just all trying to expose the guy? Which, okay, I'm not it's weird, because I'm not like a huge Steve Bannon fan, but I also feel very unqualified to critique any of his work when dude went to prison for what he believed. You know what I'm trying to say? Like there's a dude code here, right? Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a dude code, and my man went to prison for what he believed, and I just kind of feel like I'm in existential violation of the dude code if I'm like, yeah, but I don't like how you do your podcast. I mean, I just, what the heck does that? I mean, dude went to prison for 6 months, man. Okay. And like, well, yes, but I don't like the fact you edited me out of your archives. Well, okay. Well, I went to prison for what I believe, bro. What'd you do? Well, that. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it just feels kind of self-emasculating in a way, right? And so not my cup of tea personally, but I just feel as if you got to give a guy who, well, pardon the pun, a lot of rope, who went to prison for what he believes in. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I mean, a guy's willing to lay it on the line like that. I kind of think the dude code calls for him, regardless of if he sets any of your, warning bells off or not. He's earned some respect.
I think that can be true at the same time you ask, theoretically, and this is...
Why are you in these Epstein files so many times over the course of several years?
What's worse than going to prison?
And with like direct interactions with Jeffrey Epstein, not just the interview I watched last week, but back and forth. He's game planning with you on how to raise money. You're game planning with him on how to improve his image. What in the world is going on here?
Why would you prefer, perhaps, to go to prison for 6 months? Because that is the much better fate than whatever is on the other side of all this.
Because, I mean, I have not seen any clips or anything of him addressing this. And maybe, listen, man, there's up teen thousands people tuned into this now or at some point in the next 48 hours. If you guys have seen that stuff, by all means, send it to me, because I'd love to know what the official war room state explanation is for, I'm in here after Epstein was busted by Trump. I'm still talking to him. Why? That's the second time. Because remember, it was the Trump administration that took away his sweetheart deal that he got from the Bush administration, which the Obamas enforced. Mm-hmm. It was Trump that took that away in his first term. And Bannon is still talking to the dude. Why? And because Bannon does strike me as the kind of guy who thinks that he's doing the 4D chess skullduggery. He's going to get some state secrets by chumming up to Jeffrey Epstein. So I might even buy that that's the explanation. He seems like the type that would think he could pull something like that off. Is that fair? Some kind of cloak and dagger routine.
And now we're right back to the beginning of Bannon in general. As connected as you are, all of a sudden, Bannon is like on the scene and omnipresent back in the
the first Trump
term.
Yeah.
And a Svengali puppet master pulling strings, and then how long did he last? And then he went AWOL. Like I don't know what to make of the guy at all.
One thing I think we do need to know what to make of. And Andy Beshear is just the latest one, and we've got one of these in our state too in Rob Sand. There is a trend line now of Democrats, and this is just, demonic immersion, just as the next stage of it. That we're now, first it is, we're afraid of the word of God, so we want to forbid you from utilizing it or talking about your faith. And we're a secular democracy, of course. The second phase is you flat earthers, appealing to these age-old scriptures and religious teachings, and, you're not with it. You haven't updated your views for science and human progressive, evolution. The third stage is where we are now. The third stage now is where they take your Bible away from you that you're not using. As Kid Rock said the other day, it's that dusty book in your house. They take it away from you and start whipping you with it. And just completely taking it out of context and feeling no fear of backlash or embarrassment because they figured out, well, you guys aren't going to use this, so I won't get caught anyway. And
using the View as your magnaphone.
Andy Beshear clearly wants to run for president. And we are seeing this in our gubernatorial race. And it's going to make it even more important to nominate candidates who can push back and defend against this. Otherwise, if we don't, all right, if we just nominate a bunch of technocrats, they're going to end up co-opting our entire belief system and convincing normies that their demonic inversion of it is actually what is right and prudent. And we're the extremists. We're going to have to start making a concerted effort to nominate people who can defend our worldview. Not just hopefully, beat a Democrat in a general, not just hopefully, do the right thing policy-wise if they get elected, but can stand up there in essentially what is a worldview trial that we're calling elections today and push back and punch back and correct the record.
This is so important.
And right now we have a dearth of those, okay? And this is way more dangerous. I'm just telling you right now, this is way more dangerous than you're a Nazi, you're a racist, you're a homophobe. Because that is effective in rallying their base, but it turns much of the rest of America off. This tactic is how they grow their base. And a lot of the suburban voters that are the swing voters that decide these things are softened up and conditioned for this after a generation of nothing shallow suburban megachurch. That soil is ripe to be plucked. Thoughts on that, gentlemen, before we get out of here for that opening segment?
Yeah, well, when he talks and when Rob Sand talks, in terms of affect, they sound exactly like Mike Pence.
Yeah.
And that's
one leads to the other.
Well, that's why your point. That's why I said your point is so important. Our side has been on the intoxicating ether of the nicer than God messaging. And that's why we should be, we got to nip this thing in the bud right now. For all the reasons you just said. This thing is, it's snake oil. And there's proof of concept that people on both sides of the party believe it. And we have an opportunity right now to do something about it. And it has to do with picking the right people who pick the right fights on the right hills at the right time.
This is why I said, I think it was the beginning of last week or the week before that because of this dynamic that we're seeing now burgeon in front of our eyes, it's time to get a lot more confrontational and demand that our candidates, particularly political candidates, are much more confrontational. Why is that? These people's souls are in mortal danger. They're also trying to put the souls of as many people as they possibly can
Romans 1.
in mortal danger.
Yes.
And they're using the name of Christ while they're doing that, claiming the name of Christ while they're doing it. Yeah. We have to be confrontational because we love them. Yeah. But if they're not going to seek repentance, they must be defeated, and defeated soundly.
And so the point you're making, at the very least, it's the difference on our side between Mike Pence and J.D. Vance.
100%.
In a Trump term. That's 100%. What you're talking about.
100%. I mean, what Beshear does in that clip is at the very least approaching what Jesus said was the unforgivable sin, the blaspheming of the Holy Spirit. Or attributing the works of God directly to attributing the works of the devil directly to God. Because what's the context of when he said that, when he was accused of being Beelzebub, casting out Beelzebub, right? That's another name for the devil casting out the devil. And so this is now where you are attributing to the works of the devil to the Holy Spirit, the works of God. At the very least, is that fair to say that Andy Beshear is at least approaching that with that language? He's at least flirting with that.
Oh yeah.
And being nicer than God does not deal with that appropriately.
Because here's the thing, they don't notice they don't tell you, and well, listen, according to my, demonically inspired, satanically driven religion, this is how we do things. They're not saying that. So the clear inference to the normie is, which religion are we talking about? Christianity. That's the inference. And however long you thought it took us to dig out of the fear of being called racist and homophobe, however many years you thought we emasculated ourselves and numbed ourselves to avoid being called that. You want to talk about a force multiplier. The level of damage it will cause us to not have candidates in significant races who are capable of pushing back on this and putting it in its place. And I won't even say generational damage, because I don't think we've got a generation left to fix the current problems we have, let alone put them off for another generation because of what this would do in allowing the Christianity to be redefined to the normie voter out there. I mean, this is a do or die. We cannot allow them to do this if we have any chance of winning whatsoever. More in a moment.
Deace Show.
Hey, let's face it, your credit score may have taken a big hit over the holidays. How many last-minute purchases did you have to go out there and do? Forgot that gift, forgot that person. And you may not even know it. And that's exactly why you want to check out our friends over at Smart Credit, the new science in credit scoring. Smart Credit's data experts, they understand how the credit bureaus operate. They're going to build a personal strategy for you designed to take action and maximize your score, not by a few points or even in a few months. Because this is, you got to know how this works. I mean, do you know you could just like pay off all your debt in one fell swoop and not get the boost to your credit score that you thought you were going to get? It sounds crazy. It is. And that's exactly why you need Smart Credit to help you put more money in your pocket. Better credit scores could mean faster approvals, lower payments, better interest rates, etc. Go to smartcredit.com/Steve. Start your 7-day trial for just $1. Smartcredit.com/Steve. Start your 7-day trial for just $1. Results not guaranteed. You can cancel anytime. Smartcredit.com/Steve. Again, that's smartcredit.com/Steve. So there is, I think, a rightful amount of angst about what's happening right now with the Republican base voter. We saw this in 23. We saw it, well, first of all, in 22, we did not have the red wave we were hoping for outside of a couple of states. And then we saw in the off-year midterm special election cycles of 23, 24, Democrats outperformed their polling or partisan demographics in those races by an average of nearly 9 points. And we saw that exact same trend line again in 25. We're seeing it early on here in 26. Heading into the midterms, it seems like we are struggling to get our voters out unless Trump himself is on the ballot. At the same time, which kind of confuses things, there are polls out now from credible pollsters showing that it's actually the sort of mainline establishment Republican voter that's the one not showing up. And of course, Trump's getting all that polling, and that's why you hear him probably softening some of his rhetoric on things like immigration, because his pollsters are probably telling him, well, it's the Nikki Haley voter that doesn't want to vote for you right now. We need them. How do we make sense of all this? Well, I thought, you know what? There's a state Republican Party that is bringing me in at the end of March to speak at their state convention. And I've got to think, if you're inviting Steve Deace to your Republican state convention as a keynote speaker, right, then you're probably not interested in just paint by numbers GOP, download from here, will pontificate for food talking points. Todd, your thoughts?
We couldn't get Nikki Haley. Steve Deace was second.
Yeah, I'm not your plan B. Yeah, if she was your plan A, that's true. So I thought, you know what, let's discuss this with the guy running the Republican Party that invited me to speak. So Matthew Simon is here. He is the chairman of the North Dakota Republican Party. I like the shirt, Matthew. I dig it. How you doing, brother? Thank you for joining us.
I am doing well, Steve, and thank you so much for the incredible honor of coming on your show to meet you gentlemen and to represent my great state of North Dakota. It's very much appreciated.
All right. So let's just start with a 10,000-foot view here then, okay? What is the mood of the average Republican voter right now?
There's a lot of apathy, and there's a lot of feelings of imminent doom, of the primary coming up, recognizing historically what happens to the party that has the presidency in the midterm. And I think that people are allowing that history to shape their level of engagement. And it's just a lot of lack of people showing up to the plate when they're needed most. You mentioned earlier, if Trump's not on the ballot, then the numbers go down tremendously. And we've seen that in how many cycles now. So that is the fight at hand, is to try and tell people, show people where it is that their voice matters the most. And that's in the local level of politics. If people forget that and they're only focused on the presidential election, then we get a poor government and we lose in spades in midterms.
What could how much of this do we still control our own destiny, right? I'm the kind of guy, I want to have this conversation 9 months before the election, so I'm not having it 9 days leading up to the election. You know, I am a, Wayne Gretzky, skate to where the puck is going, not where the puck already is kind of a guy, right? Which, gets me in trouble at times because I have a tendency to warn people about things I'm worried about before they know they're supposed to be worried about them, right? But I like winning, man. I like winning. I'm kind of addicted to it. In fact, I'm a terrible loser. And anybody who's not is a loser, so I want to win. I don't want to do impeachment palooza podcasting next year. I don't want to do any of that. Okay. So I want to win. So how much of this is still avoidable? How much of this, because you're right, there is some history baked into the cake here we have to acknowledge, and that's true no matter which party has been in power. And I'll go through some of those numbers next segment with the audience. But how much of this is still in control of our own destiny if we do things like, you know what, if you guys want to filibuster the SAVE Act, cool, but we're going to make you actually do the filibustering. And I was just going to, file a thing in the Senate. You just stand up there for days, roll cameras, and tell the American people that they can't have the rest of their government back because we're going to make you show a photo ID to vote. At least make them do the thing and see if you can get them to crack. I mean, are those things that could change some of the apathy out there?
Yeah, absolutely. The past is only prologue if we allow it to be. There's plenty of tactical maneuvers that could be done at the national level. You mentioned several on your shows, and including what you just mentioned there, but force the Democrats into a position where they have to justify the positions that they're taking. And to your point earlier, don't wait until the last minute to do it. Now, I think people have very short-term memories, and we like the bright, sparkly things. So it's important to keep dropping that over and over all the way up to the election so people don't forget and move on in the next to the next talking point in the election cycle. But you have to come out with it early, and you have to make the Democrats defend their positions. And it should be very simple to do, because if you boil down the positions that the Democrats hold, they're antithetical to everything that this country was founded upon. They're anti-God, they're anti-human, they're anti-civil liberty. Of course, they'll claim the exact opposite, but their policies, you'll know them by their fruit. Their policies bear out to the type of worldview that they have. And I think we need to hammer them with that instead of sitting back and worrying about, statistically, this might go poorly for us because it has in the past.
What's Trump's role in this? And I said on my show the other day, I'm really loath to keep going back and tell Trump, hey, if you don't do this, it won't get done. But it kind of feels like if he doesn't do it, it won't get done, right? And one trend line we have seen, and we saw it in his first term, and we're seeing it for the most part. He's been a little tougher on Republicans so far than he was in the first term. But he's way more willing to put his thumb, fist, every appendage on the scale when it comes to leveraging a foreign government than when it comes to leveraging squishy Republicans to do what we all thought we were electing them to do, right? And Mike Lee talked about an exchange he had with Trump coming off the stage at the National Prayer Breakfast last week, and that Trump pulled him aside and said, we have got to get this SAVE Act passed. And Senator Lee said, yes, I know, Mr. President, but I just don't believe most of these Republicans are going to, or at least a critical mass of them, are going to do the heavy lifting it takes to get stuff like that passed, unless Trump uses a level of political capital against his own party that, except for when it's been about, personal political issues like him and Massey, he's been hesitant to do that on policy. And I hate going back to the guy who got shot in the face and said, hey, we need you to do this more. But I kind of feel like that's probably what's going to need to happen, Matt, for this stuff to get passed.
Yeah, I agree. And he's got the world's largest bully pulpit at his disposal, and he's trained in media. He knows how to use this, and he has got to do it. Now, along those veins, I will say, as a state party chairman, I am one of the 168 members of the Republican National Committee. We just had an event here at the end of January out in Santa Barbara, California. And one of the major pushes is that Trump has been talking for several months about having a midterm election, a midterm, giant rally, so to speak.
Convention, you mean? Your convention, yeah.
Thank you.
Like what we see in presidential elections, or a scaled-down version of that, yeah.
Yes, and a lot of the details behind that are still pretty opaque. I think they'll be fleshed out here in the coming months, but that may be the opportunity to do exactly what you're saying. It's essentially a giant multi-day Trump rally to try and get enthusiasm back in the base and convince people to come out and vote. Now, I think if he's going to be successful at that, then he needs to be very sincere and very honest with the American people and lay out, here is the risk if we don't show up. And if we don't show up and vote and make sure that we hold the House and the Senate. And you've mentioned it many times, but I don't hear Trump mention it nearly enough. J.D. Vance is much better at messaging this than is Trump right now. But he has to articulate, if we lose the House, the first thing that happens is an impeachment palooza. And it's not going to stop with Trump. It's going to go to J.D. Vance and to Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth. And I'm just parroting what you've said on your show before, but it's prescient. This is what's going to happen. We're going to have a non-functioning republic for the next 2 years, and we can't afford that. We're trying to pull out of a very dark several years, and there has to be some continuity of government in order for that to happen.
I'm curious to get your thought on my old buddy Scott Rasmussen, the original founder of Rasmussen Polling. He sold it many years ago, but he has his own polling firm now. He's got numbers showing this. I know there are Republican Party pollsters showing this data to people like Donald Trump. And that probably is indicative of some of the softer messaging you've seen with Trump on some of these issues in the last week or so in response. There's this notion out there that it's the MAGA base is all fired up to go out there and vote. And it is the Nikki Haley squishy that, they're not much of the party anymore, maybe 20% of the party in mass. That's the voter that isn't engaged right now, that isn't sold on the direction of things right now. And so, of course, the implied outcome of that to make the math work is we have to soften your approach and and be less, confrontational issues like immigration. They don't want their Consuelas all deported or their workers that have already should have been exposed via E-Verify at the meat processing plant. And so just talk about deporting criminals and stuff instead. And the danger with that I see, Matt, even if it's true, is what is more likely in any form of business? That you're going to get people that have shown they supported you hardcore in the past to show up even more, or that you can get people that have been squishy in supporting you to stop being so and support you, right? I mean, because there's a ratio here. If you get too squishy to get that, if that's polling's accurate, if you go too squishy to get that Nikki Haley, Mitt Romney voter, then you risk on the back end alienating. If it ends up being at best a point of diminishing returns if you start softening on things like immigration, because that hardcore right voters then then that's the only reason I'm voting, so I'm out, right? I mean, if your left foot is broken, you don't take a hammer to your right foot and say, I guess I got to break it now to make sure that the wobble stops, right? But you're on the front lines of this as a party chairman, so you tell us whether you think that polling is accurate, and if so, how do we rectify that?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen the polling directly, so I want to be careful about not speaking as an expert where I don't have expertise. But just from anecdotal, boots on the ground evidence, from discussions I've had, I have no reason to doubt that polling is accurate. And the point that you're making about, what's more likely here, if we soften and become squishy, are we going to pull people from the center, or are we going to pull people even from the left over to support us? Is that more likely, or is losing our impassioned base more likely? I think it's clearly the latter. And we've seen what can happen, despite all the political consultants for all these years telling us that you need to, move to the middle and be a squish. Just look at Ron DeSantis. When he came in and he originally won the governorship, it was an incredibly tight race. So all the political consultants would tell him, look, nearly half of your state disagrees with you. You need to moderate. And he didn't. He went in full bore with a bold, passionate, conservative voice, and he enacted legislation. He did the do. He didn't just talk. And people rewarded it for him. That red wave that didn't happen anywhere in the country did happen in Florida. And I think it would do Trump well to keep that forefront too. And remember, his base are very, very passionate people. Mm-hmm. But if they're demoralized, or if they think that he's shifting or softening on things that are of utmost importance to them, they won't show up, and he won't pull in sufficient number of people from the middle or left to override the amount of loss.
I think the other reason I would not try to soften my approach to appeal to that base is because I think what would win that base over are events that are not nearly as much in control as what will turn out your own base. Because let's face it, and you mentioned DeSantis. DeSantis proved if you govern capably, that a lot of squishes will overlook how hard right you are because you've made their lives better, right? Okay. If we have some semblance of an economic kitchen table turnaround boom in the next 6 months, all those Nikki Haley kinds of voters will come back to the table, all right, because they are living the high life that they care the most about, right? Okay. And it looks like we're being governed competently. What you can't afford in that interim is to alienate that base of voters who are not in this for comfort, because they're in this for a fight. They're trying to save their country.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And to address 2 points that you've made here, that one and then the one earlier about apathy, people are naturally inclined to look at what is important to them directly first and ignore that which isn't. It is kitchen table economics, kitchen table politics. I think it's important that we show the wins that are happening under this administration directly to people at their kitchen table without glossing over some of the hardships right now. Some of the messaging from Trump on that, I just think is really missing the mark. People are really struggling with some things, and for him to, and I understand this is the way that he communicates, but for him to go out and say it's the most incredible economy ever, people don't feel that. And the kitchen table, again, dictates where we're going. So I hope that some of that messaging can get corrected, because, as state party chairman, as state parties, we're trying to take some of the messaging and amplify it, but we also have a duty to our constituents to be honest with them. And it's much easier if there's a good, honest, hard, solid message to begin with.
Matt, I'm going to see you guys at the end of March at your state convention up there in North Dakota. Looking forward to it, brother. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for being our keynote speaker. We look forward to seeing you.
You got it, brother. God bless. Take care.
God bless.
All right. What do you guys think?
Well, that's a very important conversation that ultimately ends up with a lot of people feeling frustrated because they can't envision how to nail the messaging that accomplishes that, and people keep circling. Well, we just had an example that actually has way more to do with this conversation than it does to do with football. It's the messaging, of Turning Point USA's halftime. That kind of people, those kind of people, that kind of energy, it clearly worked. There's the pattern. And whatever the kitchen table issues are, think about it within that lens. Not everything had to be perfect. Kid Rock specifically put his not perfect background out there for everybody to see. Gabby Barrett's song, by the way, is about cheating. It wasn't like a Christian hymn or anything like that. But it was about, find that in people's lives right now, because that's a starting point. They're telling you right now, it's a starting point. And if you give us that, then what Steve said, the energy will be there to follow on other matters. I can't make it more simple than that. The Turning Point USA gave you a proof of concept. We have to run with it.
What does Oron, our colleagues, say all the time? The side that wants to win is always going to beat the side that wants to be left alone. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that there's a lot more energy on our side in the base to win. Imagine if we had a party apparatus nationwide who believed the same thing. Look, the Democrats are about to light themselves on fire again, shutting down the government, because that's what their base demands. They demand to win all the time. Imagine if we had a party like that.
Hour 2 is next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace. He's Aaron McIntyre. He's Todd Erzin. You can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, at Deace Show on YouTube. Again, that's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then if you wouldn't mind, if you're a podcast listener, thank you very much. You guys are a big part of our audience. Please leave us a 5-star review if you dig us. Many of you have. Thank you for each and every one of those. And then you can also hit subscribe, or if you're on Apple iTunes, hit follow. And that's how you're going to know you never miss an episode, because it falls there in your podcast feed every time. And many more of you have done that. So thank you. We appreciate all of those. As we appreciate our friends over at Beam, who sponsor this portion of the program. It is the powerful blend of all natural ingredients like reishi, magnesium, and melatonin and more to make sure that you get the absolute best night's sleep that you can, so you're ready to go take on the day. It revives the old tradition of the hot cocoa or hot milk before bed, except this one's not loaded with carbs and calories. Several different flavors. I'm a chocolate peanut butter guy myself. You just take a drink of this and get the best night's sleep you've had in quite a while. And right now, they're offering you guys, for being a part of our show, an exclusive discount. Go to shopbeam.com/Steve to take advantage of that. ShopBeam, BEAM, as in Mary. ShopBeam.com/Steve. Use the code Steve. If you do, you'll get my exclusive offer for up to 40% off of Beam's Dream Powder. And with my discount code Steve, you're going to get it for just $39. And if you think about it, it comes down to $1.25 a night for a good night's sleep. Would you pay $1.25 to get your best night's sleep? I know a lot of you would, so let's do that right now so that you're ready, refreshed to go take on the day. At shopbeam.com/Steve, use the code Steve. Code Steve at shopbeam.com/Steve. All right, so we were just talking to Matthew Simon. He is the state chairman, member of the Republican National Committee for the North Dakota GOP. They're having me come up there at the end of March to keynote their state convention. So I figured if you're asking Steve Deace to come and keynote your state GOP convention, then you're probably not into just pablum and spoon-fed consultant talking points, right? And so let's get a perspective from a guy who's his own man and get his read of where things are at. And so he kind of gave you the granular read of what he sees on the ground in a very red state. I now want to, take this thing a little bit higher to what I think the overall environment is that we are up against in 2026. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes laying this out, and then Todd and Aaron, you guys can give me your questions, comments, or insults. Okay? All right? So the way I see it, I think, and unless Todd or Aaron come up with something that makes me fundamentally rethink what I'm about to share with you, this is kind of the rubric, the Rosetta Stone for how I am going to be analyzing these midterms for the next 9 months from today is when they take place, okay? This is my best read of what the environment we are facing in this cycle happens to be. I think that we have three systemic problems that we have to confront. Number one, and Matthew alluded to this in our interview, and that is just the history here. There's a historical trend here. The president's party traditionally underwhelms in midterms immediately after winning the presidency. Reagan in 82 lost over 30 House seats, for example. Bush in 1990 only lost 8 House seats because Democrats already had a massive advantage in the House. But Republicans lost the popular vote for Congress that year nationwide by almost 8 points in 1990. Yikes. Clinton in 1994. That was the contract with America. That was the biggest Republican midterm election victory in about 50 years. Obama in 2010, that was the first Tea Party wave. And then Trump in 2018, Trump lost 40 House seats. So we are up against a bipartisan historical trend here. That's number one. Number two, and we talked to Matthew about this as well, our base just doesn't show up these days in the numbers we need unless Trump himself is on the ballot. And I would take this further to say they're being further demoralized by Congress almost daily. And here's the third systemic problem we have. We are currently way underwater with normies and independents, like way underwater. Like even Mark Mitchell's numbers at Rasmussen have us like underwater by like 20 with independents and normies. Okay. Now, the one thing about midterms is they're always lower turnout elections than presidential election years. They're always more turnout the base elections than presidential election years are because of that. And so, you're kind of, pin the jello to the door, pin the tail on the donkey, trying to figure out how many normies in a given place are going to show up to even vote in a midterm, right? That's really hard to do. I just know you don't want to be underwater by 20. Even if you have demonstrably lower normie independent voter turnout than you had in the last presidential election year, whatever that number is, you don't want to be minus 20 with said turnout number. That's all I'm saying. That's my humble suggestion.
There's those Rain Man-esque analytical skills.
They don't call me the best color man in the business for nothing there, Bob.
Don't suck.
Yes. All right. That sucks too much. That can't work. I know that. I don't know what will work. I just know that won't. Okay. What other show could give you that, folks? Indeed. All right. So here's what I think we need to do in light of each of those three things. Let me now counter suggest what to do here. To me, the counter to the historical precedent that we're up against going back decades, if not longer, of the president in power having a bad midterm right after winning a presidential election, is I think we need to counter message this now with a more powerful historical trend. And that is simply the Democrats are the most radical political party in American history. And it's not like there's not ample evidence of this, which just mounts every day. I mean, Andy Beshear on The View. Well, yes. I mean, my God tells me to mutilate your kids. The evidence for making this case is ample. So you can try to message against the historical trend and saying that's all irrelevant because we've never seen a party as radically anti-American as the current Democratic Party is. That's my first suggestion. On suggestion number 2 about what to do with the lack of energy and base turnout unless Trump himself is on the ballot. I think Trump can, and he will, I think, hit the trail to nationalize this midterm behind his name hard. I think we may see Trump do more than any president in modern times to put his name on the ballot in these midterms. And that's going to give us a chance to de facto make him, because right now we're getting all the blowback, right? You're getting all the energy from the other side, but we're not necessarily getting the benefit of him on our side. So I think we can balance the scales a little bit, maybe even more than a little bit, by Trump's ability to nationalize this race behind his name in order to get a level of voter out that would vote for him and not for just, Acme Republican. But I think even Trump's prodigious messaging capabilities, and we might be talking about the greatest pitchman in American history. I mean, he's on the Mount Rushmore of American pitchmen. Is that fair?
Yeah.
This is not an easy pitch, though. Okay? I mean, if we could conduct a seance and call back the spirit of, J.T. Barnum. Hey, bro, how do we message, hey, I need you to vote for this whitewashed tomb Republican who didn't do a darn thing for us for 2 years. Because if you don't, I'll be impeached next year. I don't know. I have no idea how to message that. I have no suggestions for how to message that. But that's essentially the message right now, right? We need you guys to go out there and all vote for a bunch of Republicans that didn't do a cotton picking thing for us the last 2 years. Otherwise, next year we're screwed. That's the message. So I'm going to suggest that message isn't sellable. Okay, and that we have a better message. Okay, one that aligns with some facts that are not currently in existence. Okay, so
this sucks, and I suggest we don't suck.
Yeah, this sucks. So stop sucking here. Okay, and I'm going to suggest that the best message is going to be if congressional Republicans would do something. Like they all had a retreat last weekend.
That's where you lost me right there.
Okay, they all had a retreat last weekend. A friend of mine actually went out there and spoke and mentioned you all need to be, it was the Freedom Caucus had a retreat, he said. And he went there and spoke, and he sent me a text because I told him they really need to be listening to your show right now. And I said, they don't have to invite me to the next retreat. I'm going to just make it real simple for them. Okay. I feel like I'd be collecting the honorarium, as a scam. It's like that Mad Men meme. Okay. Do literally anything you promised during the election.
It's not like the meme. It is exactly that.
Just literally anything.
Yes.
So I'm going to save you whatever, and I'm guessing a congressional honorarium is probably pretty good. So maybe I should have kept my mouth shut. All right. But I'm going to save you all the honorarium. You don't have to, call my agent and book me for this. Do literally anything you promised during the campaign. One thing. Give me one rib. Literally anything. Literally just said do anything. Literally anything. Just literally anything. Like literally anything. Just do that. Just pick one and just maybe do it. Yeah, that's my advice. That's the best I got. But back to what I said to Chairman Simon last hour, I think that this is going to require Trump putting a thumb, a fist, an elbow, maybe every last appendage he has, maybe just sitting on the scale, squatting on it to make this happen. He's going to have to exert more political capital than he has been willing to do against his own party for much of his political ascendancy, I think, to get this done. I just don't think they're going to do it because they care about America or care what we think. I don't. I just don't. Number 3. All right, so how do we counter that we're underwater with normies and independents? Well, I think Trump has to resist the temptation he currently seems to be succumbing to, which is to go soft on contentious issues. I see that as immigration, in order to appeal to some mushy middle. This mushy middle doesn't exist anymore, not in the way that it used to when Todd and I were kids. Okay? The mushy middle used to be people that, well, I think I can split the baby in half on all these issues. How, Rush used to mock them when we were kids, right? The people that drive down the middle of the road, literally down the middle of the road, won't pick a lane. Okay. It's worse than that. Now, the mushy middle normie voter now, it just wants competency and comfort, and doesn't really care which ideological direction they get it from. They just want competency and comfort. And so if it seems as if the trains are running on time, if we've got 20 million illegals, they're cool with it. And if it seems the trains are running on time, if we deport them all, they're cool with that. Now we can take advantage of this. Like this is what, where Matt's bringing up the example of Florida is so key. You can do all kinds of radical things, man. Like DeSantis proved if you could do them and then do them while governing competently, all those normie voters suddenly now end up in your back pocket. Now, what you're seeing post DeSantis is there's no guarantee that you made those people into Republicans and they're going to hang around, right? Okay. But we'll have that problem later, and hopefully we'll have the luxury of having that problem later. Right now, we have a problem of now, and they're not in our back pocket at all. Okay. And here's something I think that is very important to keep in mind is that Trump actually lost independence in 2024 overall, and still became the first Republican in 20 years to win the overall popular vote. And I went and looked, and I cannot find a single national election that Republicans won by softening their message. I can't find a single one where it worked. So here's my conclusion. I think there is a ratio here that we need to find the sweet spot for this ratio, and where we currently are would not be it. But it's a ratio of how much greater an economic turnaround needs to be felt by the average American to compensate for any depression in a base that is fed up with congressional Republicans overall, the lack of deep state accountability, and any immigration softening whatsoever. Like let me tell you how this ratio works out before I finish this part. Just to give you one example, to make sure you guys were on the same page. It would be one thing if there was like a high value member of the Trump administration that was all over the Epstein files, that you could then go back and say, yeah, okay, I guess I can see why Trump decided for 6 months just to do a heel turn on that issue with his base and fight them on it and risk depressing 1 or 2 points of his own base. I guess I can see, given who that person is, right? Not saying we would morally agree with it, but again, we would politically understand said calculation, right? Right now, as far as we know, the highest value target member of the Trump administration caught up in all of this is Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Would he be such a high value target? No. No would be the answer. No. Is Howard Lutnick worthy of one more point of normie voter you've got to figure out how to get to vote for you because you pissed that 1 point of your base off? No. That's the rate. See, now, this is the ratio I'm talking about. It's kind of what I was alluding to with Mr. Simon last hour. This is the teeter-totter. There's a sweet spot here, all right, where not everybody's happy, but nobody's necessarily unhappy, and you've balanced the scales. Like, it could be better, but I'm not, like, upset, okay? Right? That's not where we are. And so since last July, and until the congressional legislation made them change their minds, I mean, Trump spent about 6 months essentially mocking his base over the Epstein issue. I mean, not even just opposing them, but mocking them. You're falling for a Democrat psyop and everything else. Of course, then we get the Epstein files, and it's almost all Democrats that are implicated, like many of us thought. Okay, was there a political ROI anywhere to be found by that decision, as far as we know? No. Do you know of one?
No.
Aaron, do you know of one? Yeah.
No.
Any political objective? You know what? A key ambassador who's forging a peace deal. A lot of people think that there's no real evidence of it yet, but a lot of people just instinctively think Epstein must have been boosted by intelligence agencies like the CIA or Mossad to get the access to the elite circles that he got. Right. All right. Mm-hmm. Let's just play with that for a second to further explain my point. Right. Let's say that Trump did that because right now he's trying to forge a historic peace agreement between, every Muslim country but Iran as a as an alliance with Israel for perpetual peace in the Middle East. And the guy that, but one of the guys who's able to get all these people to the table together enjoyed him some Epstein Island in 2011 or something. And so he's trying to keep that buried long enough to get this deal. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That kind of political calculation that, frankly, sometimes, sadly, you do have to make these kinds of calculations in a sinful world, right? You don't always get to deal with the choir boys and people of the that are given their utmost for his highest. That's not everybody we're dealing with here in this arena, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the deal got done, and then we found that out. And then we were like, hey, we still should have released these, but at least understand the political calculation we made here for a greater good, a greater political ROI that might have been at risk at this sensitive moment in blowing this up. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes. My hesitation when I pause, I understand your math. I'm just trying to understand if it resonates at all with the normie voter you're talking about or the base that doesn't show up unless Trump's on the ballot. Like, is there a new math involved? Will they track it all with this math? That's
Your
why
point
I'm
is
pausing.
your point is excellent. Your pause is right, and it feeds into my point. See, we're not to the point of your pause because we haven't faced anything like that. Trump just decided to go to war against his own base over this for 6 months for Howard Lutnick. For Howard Lutnick. For that guy? For Howard Lutnick. That's the highest value current Republican target that has been implicated in all of these files as far as I know. Do you guys know anybody that's more directly tied, involved? I guess you could say Steve Bannon, but let's face it, Trump kind of has a... Last week, Trump was why don't you guys shut up and let me cook meme at Steve Bannon? And then 3 days later, Steve Bannon's a great... Steve Bannon is entirely expendable to Donald Trump. Let's just be honest about that.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, he proved that already.
He's already proven that, correct. Bunch of people got pardons that he never got, right? Okay. So to Trump, that's not a high-value target. Howard Lutnick is? That one just doesn't make... That math would not make sense to the average Republican voter, which is why they would pause at this assertion. And the fact that we would pause at this assertion indicates that our math is bad. Because nothing has been revealed that has demonstrated it was worth taking Sean Ryan's audience and deciding to have Ro Kahana. How many more days is Sean Ryan going to have Ro Kahana on his show? I mean, you see that in my feed, like, is it the Sean Ryan Ro Kahana show? Are they just doing it together now every day? I mean, but that was the guy that was doing all of our content a year ago. You demoralized him. He feels like he got lied to, got taken advantage of. To some degree, he did. And so what did we do that for? What did we get out of taking a guy that's getting 5 to 10 million downloads an episode and turning him into a court jester against our own team? What did we get out of that? Do you know?
No.
Nothing is the answer. Absolutely friggin' nothing. So these are the kinds of calculations we have to that are at stake here. And our math is very, very, very bad. We're not getting anything out of this. So currently, I don't see that we could produce an economic kitchen table boom capable of any level of base depression. I don't. And I think all of our current numbers seem to indicate that. And so here's what else that means, that the improvement of this ratio will determine the outcome in November. So how does it get improved? Well, I really don't think there's much more, those of us that are doing the messaging to people like you, that are between the party and you, the conduits of messaging. I don't think there's some message we can give you to make you overlook the fact that, you can't afford a house or find a buyer for your house. I just don't. I don't think there is one. I think that I think this is down to policy and results now. That's also, by the way, why I'm not as worried about the president's ongoing messaging about how great the economy is. You know why I'm not worried about it? Because here's the reality. If it doesn't turn around, we're screwed anyway, regardless of what he was saying in December of 25 and January and February and March of 26. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If the affordability thing doesn't turn around, we're screwed anyway. Okay? So it won't make a difference. All right? Okay, maybe we lose 42 House seats instead of 40. We're screwed. Okay? On the other hand, if it does turn around, no one's going to remember what he said back then because he can then turn around and say, see, I saw it before everybody else did. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This is not about messaging for the most part anymore. For the most part now, this is about policy and results. All right, that's my read of this environment. Gentlemen, pick it apart.
Well, thankfully, on the messaging front, we have something tailor-made for dealing with this. You couldn't have something better to pivot off of, and a guy who's good at pivoting off this kind of thing, because it speaks to point one, the radicalization. It's flat out un-American now, and it's also demonic, obviously, which is why it's so un-American. But just the un-American aspect of things, what's going on this year, the 250th anniversary, that Trump has already said he plans on, making it part of what's going on here in Iowa. I think that on the messaging front, that's what you do, and I think if you apply that to the kind of resolve that has always been part of American history, seeing our way through hard things based on principles, you can message on the results in a way that, instead of being Jimmy Carter malaise speeches, it's the flip side of that, when you message it appropriately, is, yeah, times are hard right now, but Americans always suffer through hard times.
You're describing the difference between how J.D. Vance messages this and Trump does.
Suffer through hard times.
I think you're asking Trump to do what I think he's incapable of doing, what you're saying. I think he's a consummate pitch man, all right? It's who he is, right? And I just don't think, you're asking a knuckleball, you're asking a Necro, Hall of Fame Necro knuckleballer to go out there and throw a split finger fastball. It's not what he does. And I just don't think he's capable of the level of empathetic messaging that you're describing.
Well, I also know that people increasingly aren't capable of honest economic analysis. There's good things you can do economically as a president, bad things you can do economically. You can only do so much with the snap of a finger that meets people where they are right when they want to be met. Okay?
Yeah.
So you have got to you do have to find a message that gets them to be willing. Heck, fine. If you don't want to spiritual analysis, a lot of people want the betting. Let's talk sports pros language. Betting. You're betting on the come. You got the results may not be there in the way we would all like them to be there. I think it's foolhardy to put all our chips in that basket. I think we should go full on. And is the presidential gathering, the midterm Valhalla, is that still on the table as far as you know, Steve? A convention.
A convention. At this point, I'd be surprised if Trump did not do it. Yeah.
So again, a huge messaging, unique messaging opportunity. Proof of concept once again. Turning Point USA just did what many people would think impossible. But if you do the messaging right and people are hungry for it, you can go up against the 400-pound gorilla and you can win.
They did it though. Okay.
Yes.
If they had told us for weeks they were going to do a halftime show to counter the NFL, and someone just went out there for 30 minutes, and just tried to make fart noises with their armpits. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the messaging helps, but ultimately, can you do the thing?
Donald Trump, you're the guy who wants this convention. You're the guy who went all in before even the governor of Iowa knew about it, that you wanted this year to be about the 250th anniversary. Be that. You said you're going to be that. Be that. And yes, that means that you have got to find it within yourself. I suggested it a long time ago, and he didn't take my advice then. But back when Sweet Cakes by Melissa, go there.
Wow, man, that's a deep track if you're pulling that one out.
Pull that money out. I told him, pull that money out of your pocket. Go pay their fines.
Everybody's like AIing. What in the hell is Sweet Cakes by Melissa right now?
Go pay their fines and say, hey, I'm not the marriage expert, obviously, but I do know good business. And it's the same kind of speech again. I know business. The people tearing down this economy, opening borders, everything they did, interest rates, they don't know business. Are we really going to go back to that again? Be patient with me. I've learned some things in my 80 years. We can't fake this. And we do have to have some kind of message, and the results may not be there and probably won't be in the way that a very fickle public wants them to be there. So go full 250th anniversary, and if not now, when? Otherwise, we're not going to have America to fight for. We got to sing the tune right now.
See, I think Todd might be barking up the right tree here, because what did you say is the voter? You said this in passing, I believe, in setting up your conversation with Matthew Simon. What's the voter, at least on our side, wearing our jersey, that's not really animated or enthusiastic right now?
The Nikki Haley, Mitt Romney voter. How
much are you going to be able to put the fear of God into them about the Democrat Party?
This is a great point. They don't care about that.
They don't care about that.
In fact, they're already voting for Trump begrudgingly. And would love to not have to vote for him again.
What would animate them? Warm, soft feels.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I think Todd might be barking up the right tree here. Because my initial inclination was you have to make sure. What they did, Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you. You have to do that to the entire Democrat Party. But does that really speak to the Nikki Haley types? Not really.
And
they would be fine. They would. That type is fine because they think that they still have things in common with that party, with members of that party. And maybe they do, and it's to their detriment. But what would actually animate them? It's patriotic fervor. Maybe drop a few more bombs right before the midterms as well.
Now, listen, one thing I know that wing loves, and maybe the only thing about them that I still like, they do like bombing Iran. All right, they're into that. So maybe a couple of Kessel runs for the old Millennium Falcon there.
And by the way, let's go first term again. This kind of soft feels was working so well that they ended up having to poison us with COVID. Because remember, Trump and the then governor of South Dakota, and 4th of July and meeting there in front of
Kristi Noem at Mount Rushmore.
Mount
Rushmore, that's right.
People were eating that stuff up, and the left said, I think we need to bring in poison from China.
That is a fascinating point. What makes those people even vote for us anymore? Not a lot, honestly.
Fireworks domestically, bombs for
generic patriotism, that kind of thing. Yeah, they did that.
Halftime, alternative halftime at the Super Bowl. That's it.
Yeah, which is kind of what in a way a form of Americana, basically.
Yes.
So Americana, bomb Iran. We can do that.
You're the '80s jingoist.
Americana,
I thought
bomb
I was
Iran.
speaking your love language.
Those are two things I agree with him on. All right. Am I fake news in being concerned about this graphic? I'm going to share this with you and get you guys' reaction next.
The Steve Deace Show.
All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show. We're powered by our friends over at Preborn. You know, Evie never imagined that she would become pregnant. In fact, doctors told her it was impossible. So when she found that she was expecting, fear took over. And her first pregnancy ended with her killing her child. And that decision left her carrying grief, burden of guilt that she needed redemption from. She reached out for help after the fact to our friends at Preborn. And they introduced her to the author and finisher of that forgiveness. And then when she became pregnant again, this time she went back to Preborn to help take care of her baby and hear that heartbeat. And now she's a mom. And her daughter is alive. Evie is spiritually alive. And I don't know for sure that it wasn't one of you in this audience that put up the resources to make Evie's story possible, because you guys have been incredibly generous over the last few years of this partnership with Preborn. For as little as $28, you could fund the ultrasound that might be the next Evie. All gifts tax deductible. 100% of the donation goes directly to saving babies. Please join us here at The Blaze in supporting this 5-star charity known as Preborn. Make your donation today at preborn.com/Steve. Again, that's preborn.com/Steve. Okay. I'm going to put myself up for fake news or not now, because there's a graphic going around about more diversity of thought on the political right than on the left. And those of you that are watching right now or later on, you can see just this is incredible. The difference in diversity of thought between Team Blue and Team Red. This is incredible. It's the kind of thing that you kind of just anecdotally and experientially know, watching how their side communicates in the media, and they're just all in lockstep. But then to see it quantified with scientific polling like this is just like, we are literally up against a cult. The Christian church doesn't have this kind of unity. And I don't think it could if it tried. I mean, Todd wants us all to be unified. We just all go in there and start arguing about Mary day one. The whole thing would just become an argument. Okay? Just one argument or one banner. It'd be all the same arguments, just under a singular banner. Okay? This is cult-like. I want to make this very clear. Human nature isn't capable on its own of this level of unanimity of thought by natural means, is what you're seeing from Team Blue.
And amazingly, one of the ways it did it, by claiming to be the party of
diversity. Yes, okay. So I want to make very clear, I'm not advocating having our eye chart look like that. I mean, that's Hail Bop. That's hey, what color of Kool-Aid are we serving today? That is not good. All right? So if I made that point clear?
Yes.
I'm not advocating we look like that. I'm not. What I am advocating, though, is we can't look like that, the red side. And here's why. And I saw a lot of our peers, including people I like. Done a couple of shows with Clay Travis over the years. I like Clay. But remember, Clay used to work for Tom Daschle. He was a Democrat until the Trump era. And that's why I can see people like him. And I think of other people we know that are kind of like Clay, that the Democratic Party just became literally, insane. Like Jennifer Sayes, another gal we know, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see why, looking at it from the perspective of free expression of thought, ideas, that level of wide openness is attractive. And I'm not saying it's not. What I am saying, though, is we can't govern with that level of wide openness. And that if we have a direct conflict right now, this chart is to me this chart tells me two things. The Democratic Party is a demonically inspired construct. Just flat out cult. What it also tells me, though, is the right cannot govern this country. Because at least a not insignificant portion of the difference of thought in the red is in reaction to the lack of difference in thought in the blue, and not necessarily about what we should do differently when we have power. See what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you just one example. Right now, we have several high-profile gay influencers that are quote-unquote married with children. Right? A guy I personally know, and Dave Rubin would be one of these. And I like Dave. Just obviously we disagree on this vehemently. Who's the gal? Jillian Michaels, the fitness gal. Mm-hmm. She'd be in this group too, right? Okay. All right. And I have a worldview that says the Word of God says two things to me, to Jillian Michaels and Dave Rubin both. It says, I explicitly cannot affirm their unrepentant sin. I explicitly cannot do it. I cannot encourage it. I cannot incentivize it. I cannot do that. Well, at the same time, I have to love my neighbor as I love myself. All right? And so there's if we did 12 other issues, my guess is we'd vehemently agree with them on conservatively 6, maybe even a few more.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But when Katie Faust calls me up and says, hey, do you want to join a coalition of faith people that are trying to push back and get Obergefell overturned? The political answer would be, no, I shouldn't do that. It risks our overall coalition. The matter's largely settled in the minds of the American people. And Dave Rubin and Jillian Michaels agree with me on deportations, and that's the number one issue facing the country. That's not even a wrong political, it might even be the right political analysis. You know what I'm saying? Just if we devoid, the fact that there is a God and he gave us his word, and we just looked at it with what we humanly understand and see happening in our culture, there's probably a pretty strong argument that purely political analysis is correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as a believer, am I allowed to live by a purely political analysis? Am I? No. And so, of course, when Katie asked, and because I knew she was leading it, it would be professional, I immediately joined. Because I have to put God ahead of my relationships with some of these other people that I just mentioned, right? Okay. That makes for great content, man. It makes for great content. It doesn't make it easy to govern a country. It doesn't. And to me, I think what that graphic shows is the Democratic Party is just a flat-out cult. But on the right, we are clearly at a place where there is a contradiction between what grows a brand or what creates compelling content that reaches a critical mass of people. We're killing the left on social media, every platform. There's even more conservative influencers on TikTok I just saw. So, I mean, we are killing the left when it comes to social media and getting a message out and content. Who's winning the governing battle, would you say, right now? They are, because they're in lockstep on a message. And I think we've reached a saturation point here where this is a mile wide and an inch deep. What is it we all agree on that we can govern on? And that's going to be very difficult because everybody that wants to complain about trannyism and everybody that wants to complain about surrogacy and all the other stuff that's going on right now, all this is because of Obergefell. We didn't have any of this before Obergefell. This was the latch. We're here because all of our slippery slope arguments were right. That's why we're here. On the other hand, we have a guy like Peter Thiel, who's one of the most lucrative donors, maybe a name you don't know. Peter Thiel is a pretty right-wing guy who's one of the most lucrative donors on the right. Considers himself a, quote, gay Christian. What do we do with that? We don't know. That's why we all focus on all the time on what we hate about Democrats. But when we're really good at that. But then when we get the power on what are we going to do instead, we're not nearly as good as that. And that's why I had a different take on that graphic than some of my other peers in this industry did. So am I fake news or not, gentlemen? What do you think?
I think I think your analysis about the marketplace is correct. I think you might be making a categorical error. What this chart shows is not what the implications of this chart shows, given what we know about the actual governance of a nation, is not diversity of opinion. You are correct in pointing out that by and large, right-wing America or adjacent to right-wing America absolutely dominates the marketplace of ideas. That is true. However, the implications of this graphic is that the left absolutely has a monopoly on praxis, putting ideas into action. Mm-hmm. That's the main problem that the red part of that graph shows. In fact, it should not be dark red like that anywhere. It should just be a pastel red. Because all of your opinions, all of your ideas, whatever's winning in the marketplace, that has no meaning, really, unless it's put into action. So, yes, there's a diversity of opinion on the right. I think that's a good thing if we actually knew how to put it into action. The problem is that the left has a monopoly on putting things into action right now, which is why every time we try to put things into action, it's met with such stiff resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it a lot harder. And it tests people's adherence to their own stated beliefs and opinions. Do I really believe this? It's because when actions come up against ideas, you have to meet those actions with an equal or greater force. Actions, vibes, essays are only going to carry you so far. So I hope I'm not arguing semantics here with you, because if we actually had the depth of belief, even across the spectrum there, the depth of belief in what we say we believe, then they wouldn't have a monopoly on putting their ideas into action. But until that changes, we can have all the diversity of a thought, opinion, belief on our side that we want to, until we're ready to follow through on those ideas and keep following through and keep following through. It doesn't make any difference to the governing structure. So, again, I think there's I think you can govern. I think you can govern with a lot of diversity of the thought, because you're not. This is geographical as well.
Yeah.
What you're seeing on the blue, that's clustered in cities. What you're seeing in the red is clustered in regions. And some regions are more conservative. Some regions think this way. Some regions think that way. But there is some unity in that diversity from a geographical standpoint. So just a couple of thoughts for you.
Okay.
Well,
Todd, what do you think?
Steve's long journey of trying to solve Kobayashi Maru, wherein the people are the problem. And this show is perfect. And Steve's being incredibly patient, far more patient than he was in his younger career, and trying to, I'll do anything. Because look at just this last hour of programming. This one.
Done the same.
This is too big to work.
We've done
last half hour. This is too small to work. It's about governing versus winning an election so you have a chance to govern. And your whole career, Steve, is toggling back and forth of this because you're dealing with the fickleness of both the people, the Republican base, and the electors who have an option of voting right, and then the people who end up getting the power and doing the safety dance indefinitely.
We've done the same segment 3 times in a row.
Yes.
Yes, variations of the same theme.
Yes.
Correct. And I scheduled it that way on purpose, by the way. But yes, that's exactly what we've done. And Aaron, am I hearing you say that we haven't demonstrated that we can govern in practicum on even the shallow things that we claim to agree on before we even get to some of the deeper fundamental things that I'm talking about? Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, until we have the appetite, like Elon Musk did, of doing a hostile takeover of Twitter, we're not going to have that marketplace of action. We're not going to have access to that marketplace.
So in other words, we don't even know what the tension point is between me and Dave Rubin on the issue of gay marriage yet, because we can't govern on surface level issues before we even get to that fundamental, is what you're saying.
Basically. Tell me what we've seen over the past year now that can't just be undone. Now, there have been some great rulings, some great court rulings for Trump that should help in the future. I'll give him that. But legislatively, I'm talking about legislatively. We got the one big beautiful bill, codified tax cuts, which if you adjust for inflation, that's going to be a sugar rush in about 10, 15 years. Tell me, what can't just be undone with the next Democrat president?
Which begs the question.
Which means we're in the same place every single presidential election.
That's the key caveat. We're not saying
existential dread every single election.
Right. Aaron's not saying Trump hasn't done anything good. The key phrase is there, what else has he done good that could not just be immediately undone the next election we lose? That's the key phrase, right? Yes.
And by the way, I'm not blaming Trump. I'm blaming Republicans in Congress for that.
Yeah.
And you brought up with Matthew Simon, I like to win. Well, it's not that these guys like to lose. It's that they're playing a different game.
Yeah, their definition of winning is different than mine.
Yes.
I agree with that. Yeah, wholeheartedly. Yeah, I mean, they're there to be somebody, not do things. Agreed. So, they're serving other masters other than the people. And, what did Elon spend for X? $44 billion? We're going to probably need him to spend $1 billion.
Yeah.
Just $1 more billion to undo what's entrenched within the Republican Party and compensate for a generation of the Republican primary voter just checking out and not caring.
And forget Dave Rubin. Even amongst those of us who have passion, clearly have passion, and agree with us on the show like 90 to 95% of the time. The times we do disagree, suddenly we're dead to them, and they take their ball and they go home, and I'm gonna not be part of it anymore. So we have all kinds of. It's not one fractal line. They're all over the place in this party right now, even amongst the convicted that Aaron lays out, and rightly so.
I agree that we can govern with a diversity of thought. I just think we can govern with this level of diversity of thought. There've got to be some first things we agree on that we have to do. And then you're just out if you don't agree. Like if you're not for the SAVE Act, you're just out. You're just out. Like that has to be a fundamental thing. You're out. Be whatever you want. You just can't be a Republican. Go hard, Romans 8:28.